Hi, I'm Benjamin Mac Jackson, founder of the World War II Veterans History Project. I started this project in the summer of 2015 with the goal of providing knowledge and inspiration to my generation so they can better appreciate and understand what these heroes went through. My mission is to preserve the memories of the greatest generation. In this story, World War II veteran Vince Bolivich, a staff sergeant in the U.S. Marine Corps, talks about his time serving in the Pacific Theater during World War II. While serving in the 3rd Marine Division, he saw some tough combat on the islands of Saipan and Tarawa that he still remembers almost 75 years later. He recalls how he and his men discovered Japanese women and children hiding in the caves throughout the islands. In addition, he witnessed the horrific sight of Japanese soldiers leaping off Banzai Cliff to avoid capture by American soldiers. Here's his story.
My name is Vincent Joseph Bolovitch, Bolovich. I was born in Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, right in the anthracite region. Made it 1917. My rank, I was a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I spent 28 months in the South Pacific with the 2nd Marine Division. There were 3 of us. We graduated from high school, and it was right during the Depression. There were no jobs there or anything. So the war was coming on, so we were drafted, and we all signed up in the United States Navy, the 3 of us. And somehow I decided I didn't want to sleep on the ship, so I went and joined the Marine Corps. At the first day of Pearl Harbor, my 2 friends were killed on the USS California, right at Pearl Harbor. And somehow I would have been with them, but I left and joined the Marine Corps. And I spent 28 months in the South Pacific. I was in the Battle of Tarawa, and we moved over to Wake Island, but the Japanese left. They didn't want any part of Wake Island, so I left. So we moved on into Saipan. Saipan was a big city. They had a hospital there, a high school, grade school, and on the other part of the island, Cherikanoa, that's where they made the sake for Japan. Then they shipped all the sake over to Japan. But the United States didn't realize the shape we were in. They sent us over to New Zealand with old Springfield rifles. We didn't have any artillery, and it was stated that the Japanese were going to attack New Zealand and Australia because all the young men were over in Africa chasing Rommel up and down the desert. And they sent us to New Zealand we didn't have a full division. We didn't have any artillery. The country was in such bad shape. And the Japanese made a big mistake. They were going to attack New Zealand and Australia because there were no young men there. All the young men were over in Africa. There were just women and kids. And but they made, somehow they decided not to attack New Zealand and Australia, and we were lucky. We trained there in New Zealand, and then we went to Tarawa, and we had a rough time there. The weatherman or somebody goofed, and they didn't realize that there was a storm coming, and they had to wait in there about 800 yards before you reached land. And as soon as they got hit, they drowned, all of our men. And somebody should have gone to jail on that thing. They goofed. We were with the 4th Division. In the 2nd and 4th, we fought on Saipan. In Saipan, they trained there for about 35 years. They had caves running all directions, all through that mountain, and they had their artillery on railroad tracks. They'd push them out of the mountain, fire a couple of shots, and then push it back in there again. And the only way you could get it there is go in there and get them, because our airplanes and our air dropped bombs, but the only thing they were doing damage to was the top of the mountains. You had to go, and they planned there about 35 years, and we had a rough, I think the battle was day and night, 22 days. No sleep, no eats, no nothing. And same with the Japs. Finally, they came in there with reinforcement, and we took control over them. And when we got in those mountains and saw those caves, they ran all through. The entrances come all through the mountain. And the most pitiful sight that I ever saw in a war, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, on the bottom of the mountain, they had the young kids and the women there for protection. When we found them in that mountain, they were full of lice, and they were hungry, and they were crying. And I still remember that sight. And there was the women, some of the women were mothers to these kids. So finally we got a couple of trucks there, and we hauled them to the other end of the island. And the first thing they did there, they shaved their heads and got all the lice off of them, And there was a canal there. And the first thing they did is put these kids and women into that canal and sort of washed them a little bit. But they were sick and they were hungry. Finally, they got them going, and I don't know what happened to them after that. The Japanese soldiers, they wouldn't surrender. They were under the impression that if they died for the emperor, they went to some special heaven. And on Saipan there was a cliff about 50 foot high. These damn fools would go out there and jump off the thing into the water, and it was all rocks down there. And I'll bet you there were 10,000 committed suicide, and we couldn't stop them. We tried to stop them. They jump off of there, and we ended up, we had no prisoners. They all gave up or were killed. It was estimated they had about 70,000 soldiers on Saipan, and we never had a prisoner. They all disappeared or they got off of there somehow. The poor kids didn't have anything to do with the war, you know, or the women. And Saipan had, and they started off, there was two beautiful cities, Garapan and Cherokanoa. They had a hospital there, they had a high school, they had great schools, and at the other end of Cherokanoa they made sake. And they had sent all the sake over to Tokyo. And they had two beautiful cities, but we had to knock them down because that's where they were hiding, you know, and shooting at us. So we had to get rid of those cities. I had some of my men killed 20 yards away from me, but I never got hit. And I started off lucky. My two friends were killed the first day at Pearl Harbor. And I missed that too. Bob Hope and all, I used to bring people in there to entertain us, you know. And there was a lot of good jokes told and all. There was a lot of humor there, but not coming from us, coming from all these entertainers. And Bob Hope, he had an awful good group that would come to these islands, and when there wasn't any fights, they'd entertain us. So that was a lot of humor there. Then the scuttlebutt came out. Anybody that had 2 years or more over on the island were going to get shipped back to the United States. But we heard that all the time, you know, those rumors they were. But by golly, it came true. They shipped us, most of the battalion had 2 years over there, so they shipped us, and I landed in, they gave me a month's vacation to go home, and they said, when you come back, you come back to the University of Michigan. And I said, where in the hell is that? And at this university, they had a Navy V-12 unit. They were making these politicians' sons and all officers in the Marine Corps. Boy, and they had that duty there. And there were four of us. We trained them twice a week. And the only time they had liberty was on Saturday and Sunday, because these young fellas played football for the University of Michigan, and they had, I don't know if you don't remember Crazy Leg Hirsch, and then they were old-time football players, and they played for the university. And when they get, and they were, these fellas there, they were like gold. They never caused us any trouble because they didn't want to get shipped to Camp Lejeune and join the fighting forces, you know, because they had it good there. And we trained them twice a week, and on Saturday we teach them a pistol. And there I met my wife. She was a dietitian at the University of Michigan. And I got married in 45, and we were married 62 years. I had a damn good marriage. I got married and got out of the service. I could have had a master sergeant if I'd have signed up for the Marine Corps. But my wife said, nothing doing. All they're going to do is use you traveling from one battalion to another. So she didn't have anything to do, so I had to get out. No choice. It made me think now, and I hope that we never get into another war. This young generation, I don't know. I hope they never have to fight what we had to go through. Everybody that I knew that was in my division, they're all dead. I outlived all my friends that I used to visit, after the war. But there's nobody's left. I outlived them all. Anybody that tells me that they weren't scared, they're a bunch of fools. It was miserable because what you got, you didn't get. When you're fighting, you don't get any good meals, you don't get any sleep, because there's always airplanes dropping bombs or artillery shoot. There's always noise all 24 hours a day. So it's miserable. And if anybody tells me they weren't scared, they're lying. They're big liars. Everybody that I knew in the Marine Corps, they're all gone. I outlived them all.
Mr. Bolovitch is 100 years old and resides in Tavares, Florida. To learn more about the World War II Veterans History Project, please visit our website at www.veteranshistoryproject.com. We look forward to seeing you again for more exciting stories from the greatest generation.